Welcome. This is Cop Talk Uncuffed with your host, Jax and Ritz. Join us as we discuss current police issues and work on building solid community relationships. We will have news, interviews, answer questions, and more. You don't have to have a badge to listen. We're here for everyone. Now, here are your hosts.
Let's take it back here to June 12th. It's going to be in Atlanta. We're going to discuss that incident. Jumping into it, we're going to go back. It's going to be 10:30, June 12th, Atlanta, Georgia. Two officers, Devin Bronson and Garrett Wolf. They responded to a complaint of a man later identified as Rayshard Brooks. He was asleep in his car, obstructing other vehicles in the drive-through lane of a Wendy's restaurant, as we all know. Obviously, as we were told, they investigated Mr. Brooks for an OVI. Everything was recorded. We saw the body cam footage. He was pulled out of the vehicle. He was walked through field sobriety. Obviously, he was impaired. They proceeded to continue with the arrest. They placed handcuffs on him, and then physical altercation ensued. I don't want to say a wrestling match, but it went to the ground, a struggle. The taser was pulled out. It was taken from one of the officers. Mr. Brooks took off running. The officer chased after him. Last moment, Mr. Brooks turned around and fired the taser at the officer. The officer then shot him with his firearm and subsequently killed him. Going to have different opinions on this, I'm sure. And my opinion, I think justified shooting. I think not necessarily the best training, but justified shooting. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree that it's justified. Could we agree that maybe the officer? I mean, we've all been in a fight or a wrestling match with a suspect, and could the officer have missed a weapon during a pat down or?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So when Mr. Brooks is running away from the officer, Rolf, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And looks back and fires something at the officer. Could that officer have thought that was a firearm?
Yeah, I mean, it's 10:30 night. Possible to see. Fast evolving situation as such.
One thing I wanted to touch upon that I don't think we touched in version 1.0 was a lot of people are saying that Mr. Brooks was shot in the back. And I think that's a touchy thing because people think, well, if you're shot in the back, it's obviously because you're running away and not facing the officer. But if you look at the video, he's turned kind of sideways a little bit, reaching back with his right hand, shooting back at the officer. When the officer fires, he does hit him in the back, but it's still while Mr. Brooks is
engaging him with the taser.
Correct. So I think just saying he was shot in the back is kind of a false.
It's the media playing that narrative.
Yeah. We talked also about how tasers work, and you said that tasers, when fired, there is kind of a loud.
Yeah, it goes off. I mean, there's a light switch kicks on, and then obviously the sound. You could be mistaken for a firearm.
Okay. So these are all things.
In that situation, everything's kind of fast evolving.
Yeah, so. These are all things that are going through Officer Rolf's head at the time.
Which is a split-second decision as well.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And we talked about in version 1.0 how officers have a split second to make a decision, and then everybody else can sit back and pick apart everything for weeks and months and years afterwards.
Correct.
I think that's where we're at now. But I'd like to get Legally Blonde's opinion.
Well, do you want the prosecutor opinion or the criminal defense attorney opinion?
I would like to hear both, just so our audience can hear how the case can be viewed.
Okay, I gotcha. So as a prosecutor, I would look at where's the action. Well, first of all, you look at the kind of force that was used. first by the individual and then by the responding police officer. So let's pick it apart. Responding police officer. I watched the video, and once again, I'm not Monday night quarterback. And what does that say?
Monday morning quarterback.
Monday morning. See, clearly I don't watch football.
That's all right. We probably won't either this year with the pandemic.
Actually, that's a phrase from basketball. So.
Is it?
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. Well, see?
Bad joke.
There you go.
I got it.
Even worse than I didn't understand it. But no, so you look at the reasonableness. So first, we have uniformed police officers in the course of their employment, and there's some kind of altercation. Once again, we're watching the videos. The video that I saw appeared to be one of the cameras that was like on Wendy's or the restaurant that he was at. It was not body cam or something like that, or dash cam video. So we look at the individuals. He turns around, and I couldn't tell it was a taser. It was reported it was a taser, but I see a flash. What could that be? It could be a taser. It could be a gun. It could be some kind of pistol. I mean, it could be something. It's later determined to be a taser. Okay, so then you look at what tasers are. 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to this, same area, they determined that tasers are deadly force. Tasers are supposed to be non-lethal.
Yeah, correct.
There you go. That was the big word I was looking for. Non-lethal force, but they can be determined to be deadly force, and they can, when deployed and hit certain areas of the body, cause extreme pain, injury, and maybe potentially death. So we have lethal force pursuant to what was already established in that jurisdiction being used against an officer. Well, generally the responding officer, any individual, even if they're fighting, can use proportionate force, meaning that force or less. So if you have a non-lethal force, so if someone punches you, you can punch them back. If someone punches you, can you shoot them? Maybe, but it's going to be a really hard sell. If someone breaks the law school thing, breaks a beer bottle, is that considered lethal force? So it depends. What are they doing? What kind of proportionate force? Taser was, and I think Ritz said this in the original, it was 2 weeks prior that they determined the taser.
Yes.
It was the Atlanta Police Department, or
earlier incident. Yeah, they
early incident.
Yeah.
Classified taser as lethal force. So then you look at what did the officer do? Well, he deployed his firearm. Firearms are always lethal force. They're always classified as lethal force because police are taught in academy, you're trained to neutralize the threat. What does that mean? I don't know. But what it means when you do gun safety or you're talking about it, you don't point your gun at, you don't shoot at it unless you're intending to kill it, because the chances of something dying when it's being shot is there and most likely going to happen. Police officers are trained to shoot center of a mass, neutralize threat. So when they testify, and I've had them testify to this, what were you doing? I was shooting at center mass. Why? Because it's the biggest part, less error, less chances of hitting. You don't have to be the perfect shot, and you're neutralizing the threat. What are you doing? You're taking someone who is what you determine to be lethal force, and you're neutralizing it. You're allowed to use lethal force to protect yourself, someone else, or the general public. Certain states, like Ohio, have the castle doctrine, meaning that you can use lethal force that extends to your home or curtilage, which is like a yard or surrounding areas, if there's a threat coming in and you don't have a duty to recede first. Then you get into, well, was he shooting in the back? So, I think police officers do this a little bit during training and police academy. But there's also, as in law school, well, if you're shooting someone in the back, the general thing is if they're facing away from you, how much of a threat could they be? Okay. Well, you're looking at, they're generally fleeing. We don't have a castle doctrine or something. This is in the course of thing. But I believe they knew that from the video, and once again, it was a couple weeks ago when I watched it, that the video was you hear the one police officer saying, he has my taser, so the other officer knows that he has now deemed a lethal weapon. Is he going to use that on the general public? He's running into the street. Where is he going? Who knows? If he had a physical altercation and took the taser from an officer, is he going to fight someone else? Is he going to try to carjack? Like, what is this officer thinking, and is it reasonable? So as a prosecutor, I would look at that, and I would say, unfortunately, I do not think that there's any criminal, unfortunately for the victim's family, I think that they were within the scope of their duty. Now, that being said, the district attorney, or whatever the frick they call prosecutor down there, decided to, what I think was a bullshit charge, basically because he had precious feelings and he was scared that, there would be riots and stuff. He charged them. I think the fact that they had an independent, the Bureau of Investigations looking into it, saying, hey, we haven't done our investigation yet, why are you charging them and doing it, just shows how hastily it was done, because they really didn't want people rioting in Atlanta, which
it happened anyway.
Is an absolute awful reason to charge someone and potentially ruin their life and ruin their career because you want to get reelected. So
that officer's out on bond today as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing is, bond is, that's a whole nother story. Bond is supposed to secure your appearance in court. These $1 million bonds, when you know where these police officers leave, they're not flight risk, they have no jobs now. Mm-hmm. Why you're setting up
and they don't have private jets to go.
It's absurd. So, but don't get me on bond and your that is completely a different tangent that we'll save for another day. But
basically, what you're saying, the bond that was placed on him was purely...
It was ludicrous.
Yeah.
It was for show. This whole thing is for show. That being said, and I don't want to say that's kind of the criminal defense and prosecutor how I would defend the police officer. I think that I think this police officer is getting acquitted. I think they're going to have affirmative defense of self-defense. I think they were within their scope and within the thing. That being said, if I represented Mr. Brooks' family as like a civil litigation wrongful death, I absolutely think race was an issue. I absolutely think that this was sloppy, if not shitty, bad police work. And I think that they're going to have a claim on this. And this is why. Unfortunately, criminal law has a higher burden of proof. Why? Because you're going to, essentially, you could get a death penalty. So you want to make sure that basically there's no other reasonable explanation or beyond a reasonable doubt that someone else could have committed this crime. Civil, there's a lot less burden. So why I think that there's problems with this case, and let's go with why I think this was racial, racially involved. We are post, now I forgot because I'm so George Floyd. Yeah, we're post George Floyd, which, for the record, that was a bad cop. That guy I don't believe in the death penalty because it's super expensive for the state, but that guy should spend the rest of his life in prison. But
we agree 100%.
Absolutely.
Bad news bears. But we are post George Floyd, and we are still well in the climate of BLM or Black Lives Matter, Stop Racism, which is a very important movement, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be forefront, and you can support police officers and BLM. I support both of them. But we're in this kind of climate, and we have a black male unresponsive in the car. So what I think happened, and I'm going to kind of go through the timeline that I've seen and that I could put together. What I think happened is that we have two police officers, probably with lack of training. I think the one was newer, or a rookie, saying we don't want another George Floyd syndrome. So they basically used racism as a reason to give more discretion.
That was said. I did not hear that.
What?
In the video. Was that said?
No, but they're thinking that we don't want a George Floyd here. We don't want to have another guy claiming that we're racist. So what I think happened is that they gave him too much. They were too lenient on the stop, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to do it so not to appear that they're racist. And I think it cost his life. I think if Rayshard Brooks was white, he would still be alive. And this is why. So about 10:42 on the night of the incident, or June 12th, 2020, Atlanta Police Department received, around that time, shortly before that time, received a call about an unknown man, or a man asleep in his car blocking the drive-through lane. So, and once again, I'm not a police officer, but most of the time, I mean, we're late at night, but most of the time when people fall asleep in the car, what is that indicated of, gentlemen?
Being drunk.
Or intoxicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or potentially having a medical episode.
Correct.
Heart attack, overdose, something. There's something there, because it's not normal to fall asleep no matter what time of the day, because as a person who drives an automobile, you're supposed to be alert and awake. So an officer arrives at 10:42 p.m. and awakens the gentleman who is determined to be a black male named Rayshard Brooks, and told him to move the car space and take a nap. Move the car in a parking space and take a nap. Okay, so let's digest that. One, if there's any kind of appearance of intoxication, you never have them move a car. I mean, that's silly. Because first of all, the first thing the criminal defense attorney is like, oh, you thought he was drunk, but you wanted him to move the car, you thought him.
Yep.
Or if he's having a medical episode, probably shouldn't have him driving the car anyway. So at that point, the police officer probably should have asked Mr. Brooks to exit the car. In Ohio, a police officer can ask, if it's a lawful stop, can ask you to get out of the car for whatever reason. I'm not sure about Georgia or Atlanta. Most cases are like that. And why that is because it's for safety of everyone. It's for the safety of the individual, so they can secure them and that they're not going to self-harm or do something inappropriate. It's for the safety of the officer. And it's just basically to maintain control over the scene. They don't do that. They actually wake him up and tell him to try to move the car. He then falls back to sleep without moving the car. So now we're sitting there, playing the knock-knock game. I could just imagine the people wanting to get their Wendy's with a uniform officer just like standing there knocking on the door. He fell asleep without moving the car, and the police officer then woke Brooks up again, and Brooks finally moved the car again. So he didn't the second time pull this guy out of the car. What he should have done, in my opinion, and I don't know if you guys agree or not, he should have pulled him out of the car, patted him down for safety, and said, listen, bud, are you okay? First of all, always check for the medical. Default to that they're having a medical episode. That, can I get you help? Do you need help? If it's a no, and you use your training. Are they slurring their words? Do they have glassy eyes? Do you smell the odor of an alcoholic beverage or of an illicit drug? And you ask them, and you're feeling them, and you secure the car, you put him in the back of the cruise and say, let me figure out what's going on here. You take control of the car, you move it, you park it, you turn it off, you secure it, you secure him, you get back in. It can be cordial. People are going to get nasty, but it can be cordial. You can be, okay, listen, dude, what's going on here? Can I give you some field sobriety test? Can I call you an Uber? I mean, you can't sleep at Wendy's. They don't do that. So they pull him out. At 10:56, the second officer arrives. So now we're looking at, that is, 14 minutes from the stop. A traditional traffic stop should probably be under 12 minutes. An OVI should be generally under 20. Why? Because you don't want to infringe on someone's constitutional or statutory rights without having probable cause. And if you do have probable cause, then you should be arresting them. So you can't just go on these fishing expeditions. You can't just detain someone and their civil liberties trying to make a case against them. So now we're 14 minutes in there, and we've moved a car. So good job, Atlanta Police. Brooks is being cordial this entire time, yet he's not been pat down. They're just, and this is where I think that they were trying to overextend their kindness and courtesy because they didn't want to appear racist. So, at 14 minutes after the initial encounter with him, that's when they perform a pat-down to search for weapons. So, it appears that he didn't have a weapon. Good thing he didn't, because he could have probably killed the other officer and been long gone by then. They perform a field sobriety test and a breathalyzer test. To the officer, he appears impaired. And then he was kind of confused on where he was at. So they asked him, he admitted to, I think, using some alcohol. They asked if he would do a portable breathalyzer test, and it came back above the legal limit, which is 0.08. I think it came back 0.108, which is a good amount. So Brooks then asked to leave his car overnight and walked to his sister, apparently walked to his sister's house. And at that point, I think they even complied. Most police officers, once again, they don't want to jam you up. They don't get extra money if they tow the car. I mean, if the car is secured and off the roadway and not a hazard to someone else, a lot of times police officers are like, call someone to get the car. You can't get the car because you're drunk. And have someone pick you up at the station. We're going to process you in about half an hour. We'll release you. Mm-hmm. So now we go to 11:23. So you're talking about 40 minutes into this stop, and we still don't have a freaking arrest. We have a moving car and a guy who's being friendly and cooperative. At this time, they say, well, we think you're a little bit too drunk to drive after 40 minutes. They could have had a trial by this time. Put your hands behind your back. During the original, when we kind of talked about this, and I don't remember if it was actually on the recording or if it was kind of when we were conversing, setting up, where they're always nice until you say, oh, time to go, we're getting arrested, and then they get a little bit sassy. I would be sassy too. And he got upset. He didn't want to. It was later determined Brooks was a felon. He's had previous law enforcement. Does that mean anything to this case? Absolutely not. But it probably means that Brooks has had law enforcement. He's maybe been assaulted by police officers before. But whatever, he didn't want to go back to jail. I always tell him I'm too pretty for jail. He did not want to go back to jail. So he tried to break free, and that's where we get into about the minute and a half between them saying we're going to arrest you to the scuffle to taking of it and the shooting. We, looking at this and how I said it before, is that this was sloppy police work. I think absolutely Mr. Brooks would be alive if he was white. I think the police officers, I don't know what the heck they were doing. Hell, I've swore this whole time and I'm not going to say hell. I don't know. I think they handled the situation. I think it was sloppy. I think that Mr. Brooks escalated the situation and the police used appropriate force for the time. However, if they would have done a better job at the beginning, and I do really think that they were treating him with more deference because they didn't want to appear racist. I think if he's a white guy, he would have been pulled out. He would have had a sobriety test, and he would have been probably home by that.
That's interesting that you said that for now the second time.
Yes.
For 2.0. I've never heard that about any of this. That he was treated differently in an affirmative way.
In a positive way.
Because of his race.
They were actually giving him more leniency because he is black, because there's such that strong climate that Barack has it. But, the problem is you're treated differently.
Right.
Because of your color of your skin, which needs to stop.
Right. Justice is supposed to be blind.
It is. The Lady Justice, she has the blindfold and then I don't know what she has a scale in one hand. I don't know what she has in the other hand.
And we talked before that officers can fear that they might be looked upon in a bad light in dealing with members of other racial communities.
Well, it's black people. It generally happens to be black or Hispanics. And the problem is that you have a culture of police officers who tend to be white, at least in this area. You have a culture of black people and Hispanics that are taught not to trust the police because they hurt people just because of the way we look. So they're on guard. you have police officers who are on guard saying, I don't want to be a racist, I'm not a racist, but if you're breaking the law, I have to do this. But then they're trying to say, look at all, I'm trying to be super nice. And if they would have gave, Mr. Brooks would have been alive if he would have just got an OVI, but they gave him too much leniency, and he took it for running. I mean, but at the end of the day, you still have to look at, where's it justifiable? Absolutely, because he used lethal force. But once again, I think it was sloppy police work which led to this. So I think
I can see your point, and I appreciate that perspective.
Both perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I know, and I've talked to police officers, and there's been really good police officers that say, like, you walk up, and a lot of times you see a car going real fast, you clock it, or you do a random registration check, it comes up, you pull it up, and you're not realizing until you even get there what color it is, and you see it, and immediately you're like, are these people going to think I'm racist? That should never be your first step.
Tinted windows is a big one.
Yeah.
We have no clue who's in the car.
And you roll down the window and you see. And the thing is that at the same breath, I have friends. I have attorneys. I mean, close friends of mine that are black, and they're like, am I going to get killed or shot for something that should be a speeding violation because the police officer is walking up? So both of them have this fear of another one, which is just because people don't want to say that you're racist. People don't want to use the term black. People don't want to do this. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you need to have, and I think I said it before, it's respect. If there's mutual respect, you respect the police officers, you respect someone, his color, but you don't use it, to change anything. You're just not going to get anywhere. It's going to be this circular argument. I remember one of my very first cases, I went down to court. I met with my client who was in jail. It was a court appointed case, so I just got appointed to him the day before. We go down, and I was talking to him. He was an inmate, and he was very believable. And he's like, this happened because I'm black. And I said, oh my God, like, that, you can't do that. And I was like, okay. And he's like, the officer, beat the crap out of me. He did have a nice bruise on his face. And I'm like, oh man. I was like, okay, give me on it. Took pages of notes. I go up, talk to the prosecutor, and I was like, I think this is race. And he's like, well, okay. And he's like, all right. So he looks at the police report. He's like, all right, well, we'll talk to the officer when he comes in. Officer's coming in and out. Officer comes, sits next to me, and he's like, hey, so-and-so. And the officer's like, hey, what's up? And clearly black. And I'm like, oh my. And he's like, go ahead and tell him. Legally blonde? What do you think this is driven?
Set you up, huh?
And I was like, well, he says you did it because he's black. And he's like, I did it because he was an asshole. And he fought me, he kicked me, and this guy had a boot mark from where my guy was. He was putting him in arrest, and he kicked him as he's putting him in the car, which is a felony in the state of Ohio to assault a police officer. Didn't charge him with that because he's like, it's just more paperwork, and then I have to go to the grand jury. He charged him with the misdemeanors, and I was like, oh, okay. So it's just one of those things where you have, and I remember going down to my client, and I was like, the police officer that arrested you was black, right? Yeah. I was like, what? And he was like, well, police officers just don't like black. It doesn't matter what color they are. I was like, oh, okay. So it was just a real eye-opener that it's not, the color is a part of it, but it's also not. It's the actual police officers versus, the black community. I never thought like a black officer would be being charged with racist, and he stayed firm the whole case. We tried that case and everything. He said, and he testified. He said, I think I was, singled out, and I think racism. And I remember looking at it was a bench trial. I remember looking at the judge's face, and I'm like, oh boy, we lost that one. That one was not a one for the winner, but it's just very interesting perspective that kind of sticks with you. But I do think that a 40-minute stop for an OVI, when there's clearly, whether it was medical overdose, alcohol, there's something there. They could have secured the scene. They could have secured Mr. Brooks. He would be alive and well today.
I can agree with that. I think, Rich, you can agree with that. That kind of took a little little long for
Too
things
long.
to happen. I don't necessarily think that if the time frame would have been shortened, that things would have changed. But that's the part of Monday morning quarterbacking it. It could have ended up in the same ending, but
I agree.
Thanks for riding with Cop Talk Uncuffed. If you like the show, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Also subscribe and like our videos on YouTube. Let's partner up again next time. For now, we're out of service.